Embraer just posted the strongest first quarter in the company's entire history. Revenue of $1.4 billion, up 31% year-on-year. A backlog that's now hit a record $32.1 billion, marking the 6th consecutive all-time high. 44 aircraft delivered in a single quarter, a 47% jump from the same period last year. For a company that just 5 years ago many analysts were calling stranded, that is a number that should make Boeing very uncomfortable. Because here's the thing, Boeing had a chance to own all of this. In 2020, Boeing walked away from a $4.2 billion deal to take control of Embraer's commercial aircraft business. At the time, with a 737 MAX grounded, a global pandemic shutting down aviation, and Boeing burning through cash at a frightening pace, walking away felt like basic survival instinct. But 5 years later, that decision looks less like a smart pivot and more like accidentally handing the keys to a market worth hundreds of billions of dollars to your competitor. This is the story of the aircraft market Boeing accidentally gave away. Cast your mind back to the 25th of April 2020. Boeing issued a short, cold press release. The joint venture agreement with Embraer was over, done. No extension of talks, no renegotiation, just gone. Boeing's official line was that Embraer had failed to meet certain closing conditions. Embraer though fired back immediately, calling it a wrongful termination and saying Boeing had manufactured false claims as a pretext to seek to avoid its commitments. Embraer went further, accusing Boeing of a systematic pattern of delay and repeated violations of the agreement, pointing directly at Boeing's own financial meltdown, the 737 MAX disasters, and the crumbling reputation that came with 2 fatal crashes that had cost Boeing at least $18.7 billion by that point. Industry observers largely sided with Embraer's reading. The real reason was simple. Boeing was fighting for its life. A pandemic had torched air travel demand overnight. Boeing needed every dollar it could hold on to. A $4.2 billion acquisition of a regional jet maker was not exactly a top priority when you're just trying to keep the lights on. But here's where it gets interesting. At the moment Boeing pulled out, Embraer's entire market capitalization had collapsed to less than $1.1 billion. Boeing had been about to pay 4 times that just for the commercial division. When the deal died, Embraer's stock tanked. The company suddenly looked isolated. It had spent years preparing for life as part of Boeing's ecosystem. Now, it was stranded, mid-development of a new aircraft family, facing a decimated aviation market, with a former partner that had just publicly humiliated it. Embraer suddenly looked very alone. The question most people were asking was not whether Embraer would thrive, it was whether Embraer would survive at all. To understand why this story matters, you need to understand a specific slice of the commercial aviation market, the 100 to 150 seat category. Too big for traditional regional jets, which typically max out at around 90 seats, but too small for the mainline narrowbody aircraft that Airbus and Boeing have built their commercial empires around. The Airbus A320neo family and the Boeing 737 MAX both start their real sales sweet spot at around 165 seats and climb from there. For decades, this segment sat in an awkward middle ground. Airlines that needed it were flying aging aircraft on thinner routes, often with equipment that was becoming increasingly expensive to operate. The demand was fragmented. Nobody had a clean, modern, purpose-built answer that made real economic sense. The number of cities without any air service, or served less than once daily, grew from 49 in 2019 to 85 by 2023, according to Embraer's own market data. That growth represents routes too thin for a 180-seat narrowbody, but too significant to ignore. Real passengers, real revenue potential, real demand that was not being served well. This gap, this kind of no man's land in aviation, was exactly where Embraer chose to plant its flag. Here's a strategic truth that doesn't get enough attention. Both Airbus and Boeing, through entirely rational individual decisions, left this segment increasingly underserved. Boeing's approach with the 737 MAX was to stretch upward. The MAX 8 carries between 162 and 210 passengers. The MAX 9 carries up to 220. The MAX 10, Boeing's biggest narrowbody, pushes toward 230 seats in some configurations. The economic logic is perfectly sensible. More seats per flight means lower cost per seat, which means better margins for airlines. So Boeing kept growing the 737 family upward, chasing the economics of scale. Airbus had done essentially the same thing. The A320neo family, particularly the A321neo and its long-range XLR variant, has become one of the most sought-after aircraft in commercial aviation history. Airbus secured over 500 A320neo orders in 2025 alone. The A321 XLR can fly transatlantic thin routes. That is the prize Airbus is hunting, not the 120-seat regional market. The result of two rational strategic decisions by the world's two dominant aircraft manufacturers was that neither of them was particularly focused on or excited about the 100 to 150 seat market. Airbus does of course have the excellent A220 inherited from Bombardier, which touches parts of this segment, but Airbus's primary commercial firepower was pointed firmly upmarket. Boeing had absolutely nothing purpose-built for this space at all. Its smallest 737 MAX variant, the MAX 7, seats 138 passengers and has still not received FAA certification as of early 2026. Its development had moved slower than expected, orders had been sluggish, and it represented an aircraft designed around a fuselage that originally flew in 1967. While everyone else stretched aircraft upward, Embraer focused downward. The Embraer E-Jet E2 family is arguably the most underappreciated commercial aircraft program in the world right now. The E175 E2, the E190 E2, and the flagship E195 E2 were designed from the ground up to be the most economical aircraft ever built for the 70 to 146 seat range. The E195 E2, the largest of the three, can seat up to 146 passengers in a single class layout. It's powered by the Pratt & Whitney PW1900G geared turbofan engines, one of the same engine families that powers the A320neo. That engine alone delivers transformational efficiency gains compared to the previous generation. Lot Polish Airlines reports their E195 E2 is 25% more efficient than the previous generation E195. According to a simple flying analysis from 2025, the E195 E2 delivers 12% better fuel efficiency over its close competitors. In a market where airlines are scrutinizing every cent of operating cost, that kind of number changes purchasing decisions. Embraer's own data shows the E195 E2 is profitable at approximately 80% load factor, a threshold achievable even on thinner, less popular routes. The aircraft also features full fly-by-wire technology, a wider cabin than you might expect for its size, 2x2 seating that means no middle seat anywhere on the aircraft, an excellent short field and hot and high airport performance that lets it operate from airports that a 737 or A320 simply cannot use. That last point is not a minor footnote. Avelo Airlines, which placed a firm order for 50 E195 E2 aircraft in September 2025, valued at $4.4 billion, specifically cited the E2's short-field takeoff capability as a key reason for the order. It lets Avelo reach airports that larger narrowbodies are physically locked out of. That is a real competitive advantage that doesn't show up in a simple seat comparison. The order book has been building quietly and then suddenly very loudly. In 2025 alone, Embraer signed 157 new E2 orders, plus 140 additional purchase rights across every continent. SAS placed an order for 45 E195 E2 aircraft, valued at approximately $4 billion. True Nord placed a firm order for 20 E195 E2s in its first ever direct order with an aircraft manufacturer. LATAM Group placed orders for up to 74 E195 E2 jets. The commercial aviation backlog specifically hit $15.2 billion in the third quarter of 2025, a 9-year record. These are not small regional carriers hedging their bets, they're serious airlines making long-term fleet commitments. That is the sound of a market quietly being claimed. The pandemic did something nobody fully anticipated. It didn't just temporarily suppress air travel, it permanently reshuffled what types of routes airlines wanted to fly, and how they wanted to fly them. Before 2020, the dominant logic in commercial aviation was size and frequency. You put as many seats as possible on the highest demand routes, and you flew them as often as you could fill them. Hub and spoke dominance, big metal, big loads. After 2020, airlines began learning something. Passengers, particularly on thinner routes and between secondary cities, had a growing preference for frequency over capacity. Given a choice between a once-daily 300-seat flight and a twice-daily 140-seat flight, many passengers prefer the scheduling flexibility of the smaller, more frequent option. It simply fits their lives better. Think about what that means for aircraft economics. Instead of one departure daily with a 737 MAX carrying 200 passengers, an airline might profitably run 2 departures with an E195 E2 carrying 130 passengers each. More flexibility for passengers, better connection opportunities for the airline, and crucially, lower risk per departure on a route that might not yet justify a full narrowbody. As I mentioned, the number of underserved city pairs has been growing. This isn't a temporary post-pandemic distortion. It reflects demographic and economic growth in secondary cities across Asia, Latin America, Africa, and parts of Europe and North America where populations large enough to justify regular air service are spread across cities that will never be mega hubs. Those cities need a 120-seat aircraft, not a 220-seat aircraft. And they need it to operate economically without depending on 95% load factors every single day. Embraer built exactly that aircraft, and then had the fortune, or more accurately the discipline, to keep developing it and selling it while the world's attention was focused elsewhere. Whenever Embraer's E2 revival comes up, someone always asks, what about the Airbus A220? Doesn't it compete directly with the E195 E2? And the honest answer is yes, partially. The A220-300 and the E195 E2 do overlap in their capacity range, but they're not the same aircraft serving the same economics. The A220-300 has a list price of approximately $91 million. The E195 E2 lists at under $70 million. By all means, these are list prices and not necessarily what airlines actually pay, but that $20+ million gap per aircraft matters a lot when an airline is ordering 30, 40 or 50 units. The A220 is generally seen as offering a superior passenger experience and very high-spec cabin product, which explains why carriers like Air France, Swiss and Delta use it to replace older mainline jets on premium short-haul routes. The E195 is slightly different in positioning. Its lower acquisition cost, its specific short-field capabilities, its range of about 3,000 nautical miles, and its operational simplicity make it particularly attractive for low-cost carriers and regional mainline operators expanding into thin markets. For example, that's why Avelo, a low-cost carrier, picked the E2. It's why LATAM, expanding into secondary South American cities, is picking the E2. These two aircraft are nibbling at the same broad segment, but they're not identical propositions. Which brings us to the uncomfortable question for Boeing. The A220 is Airbus's. The E195 E2 is Embraer's. What does Boeing have? Let me be specific about Boeing's current position, because the numbers are sobering. Boeing's consolidated debt stood at a savage $54.1 billion at the end of 2025. In the same year, the company burned through $1.9 billion in cash. Its former CEO Dave Calhoun stated publicly that developing a clean sheet new narrow-body aircraft would cost approximately $50 billion, an absolutely staggering figure by any measure. The company is still working to certify the 737 MAX 7 and MAX 10 variants, neither of which had received FAA certification as of early 2026. The 777X, Boeing's flagship widebody, has now absorbed another $4.9 billion charge on updated certification timing. Boeing is aware of the gap. Preliminary studies have reportedly already begun on a 737 successor. Talks have taken place with Rolls-Royce about engines. Concepts, including the transonic truss-braced wing, an experimental high-efficiency design with ultra-slender wings, are being explored. But these are early-stage concept studies, not a committed program. There is no launch, no timeline, currently no aircraft, despite rumours to the opposite. The strategic problem for Boeing in the sub-150 seat market is not just that it lacks a product today, it's that even if it committed to a new aircraft tomorrow, industry development timelines mean entry into service would realistically be in the 2030s at the earliest. By then, even if we ignore the initial E-Jet variants, Embraer will have had a full decade or more of uncontested sales in this segment. Airlines will have ordered, received, and integrated hundreds of E2s into their fleets. Training programs will be built around the type. Maintenance contracts will be locked in. Switching costs will be real and increasingly high. Boeing didn't just lose a deal, it might have lost the entire market. Embraer is not sitting around waiting for Boeing to find its strategy. The company is expanding its production across Brazil, Portugal, and the United States simultaneously. It's pushing the E195 E2 as a small narrow-body concept, a deliberate reframing that positions it as a genuine mainline aircraft option for routes that don't necessarily require a full 180 seats. That $32.1 billion backlog, the sixth consecutive record, shows you the direction of travel. Airlines are ordering Embraer aircraft because the economics work, The aircraft performs, and it performs well, and the market it serves is growing. For years, everyone assumed that bigger aircraft were the future of commercial aviation. More seats per trip, lower cost per seat, more efficiency at scale. It seemed logical. But aviation has a habit of rewarding overlooked opportunities. Thin routes, secondary cities, corridors too narrow for a 737, but too significant to ignore. So while Boeing was wrestling with grounded jets and factory crises and a debt pile that would make any CEO lose sleep, and while everyone else was looking up, Embraer quietly stepped in, and they haven't looked back since. Thank you so much for sticking with me once again. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I really appreciate your support. Thank you.